Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, and you join me in the hallowed halls of Jigsaw 24 in Soho in London. We're at the Mix with the Pros event, and I'm joined by Rich Nevins from Avid.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Thank you so much for coming up into the steampunk room, surrounded by an old friend.
I know, I feel comfortable when I'm next to one of my babies here.
So even though your northern tones defy where you're currently based in the States, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been in the US pretty much most of my working life. I went to college there. I basically started. I was a musician, like many of us in this business were, and as my fame and glory prospects withered out, I got a job in the technical side. Always been, had a home studio, and I basically started with Euphonics in '91, pretty much when they came out of a garage, and then joined DigiDesign, Avid, back in 2004, just prior to the launch of Icon. And pretty much, been very focused on our sales solutions, on professional mixing products since then.
So, what's your role developed into within Avid now?
Well, I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I mean, being obviously on the sales side of things, I spend a lot of time with our customers worldwide, talking about, what our suggested workflows are, and basically, sort of educating on what's more going on in the Hollywood side of things, where they're sort of, on the bleeding edge of new technology. Helping to work with the pre-sales team and in terms of, demo content, looking at, how we should be selling, what specific market segments that, we should be developing our products for. And of course, a part of that interaction with customers, naturally, you get a lot of feedback. Everybody has, their squeaky wheel list, and feeding back that to product management, and helping us to steer the products in a way that's going to benefit the customers more.
So, as we said moments ago, we have a friend next to us.
Yeah.
Now, you and Simon are downstairs. In fact, we've had three, or it will be by the end of today, 3 different sessions, haven't we? We've had the two Mix with the Pro sessions and the VIP session.
That's right, yeah.
Which was very interesting, because obviously it was very much more focused on the S6 console.
It is, and this console is kind of, it's a multi-segment console, if you would. We don't build surfaces for the music mixing community and separate ones for the post community, and that's so, we try to have a versatile surface that will address functionality, for music mixing guys, obviously on short form television, and of course, one of the big challenges is our breadth of our product portfolio goes from, mixing products that start at essentially free now with the Pro Tools Control app, and then of course through the dock, through S3, or if you look at our Artist Series products, all the way up through S6. So, how do you sort of standardize as closely as you can what the operational features are, so that, and it's not really so that a guy who's working in a bedroom has got the same functionality and feature set as a guy that's working on a dub stage, but just through normal television and film workflows, things will oftentimes start out in a little edit or sound lay, prelay room, and all the way up through the mix stage. You really want to have a consistent, let's say, way that the features are implemented, so that you're not having to relearn 5 products in order to get the same job done, depending on what room you're working in that day.
And you're obviously thinking scalability and form factor, because, as you say, a lot of the functionality in the Pro Tools app, the Control app, is very similar, if not pretty much identical to the functionality of the dock, and then on to S6.
No, absolutely, and I think that's one of the cool things, is that some of the stuff, when you look at our flagship product like S6, let's just look and say the tracks page or exploded track view, that those features are now on our free Pro Tools Control app that'll run on a dock, and certain things that you'll see. The color coding for EQs are purple, dynamics are green. That is consistent from the Control app through S3 through S6. So in a way, it's helped us in terms of just having adoption across a whole range. Even guys that start off in the education side of our business, that start off in schools, or products that they maybe have in their semi-pro or aspiring Pro bedroom studios, that those same products, the workflows are pretty much the same. Obviously, you've got a whole depth of functionality that comes with the higher end stuff, but just the basic automation, getting around your session. I think there's something that's pretty common. Even if you look at music production through big feature films, there's only one direction the track counts are going. So, all of the basic automation, tweaking EQs and dynamics, that sort of stuff, it's been done pretty well with control surface products and digital consoles for a long time. What people haven't or what companies haven't focused on so well is how do we manage all of this content? On a modern day feature film where they're delivering anywhere from 500 to 1,000 tracks to the dub stage, one of the most demanding things for the mixer is getting visual feedback and knowing how to access those sets of tracks that may be spread across anywhere up to 8 Pro Tools systems. So it's that sort of data wrangling aspect of their job that's really the part that we need to put the most focus on to make that easier. Because, the EQ and dynamic stuff, that sort of thing, they could do blindfolded at this point.
So one of the things I was saying on track count was to one of the chaps who was here earlier on, is we looked at each other and went, 1,000 tracks, we wouldn't know what to do with more than about 30.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much a music mentality versus, well, clearly a Hollywood or film mentality. The idea of having 1,000 tracks in a session scares me rigid.
Well, yeah, and of course, they're not all playing back at one time, but I think because if you look at post-production workflows, you've got compressed mix schedules. So having that, it used to be that picture was locked before it went to the dub stage, right? So that isn't going to change. Now you've got picture changes happening right up until you're ready to print master the show. So with that, and then the ability to directors and the guys that are sound supervisors, they've for a long time, digital technology has given us the ability to have a lot more content than what can physically fit on the control surface itself. So mixed decisions, there's less time being put aside for pre-dubbing the show, and mixed decisions are being made really on the dub stage. So, okay, if this set of helicopters isn't working, well, we've got some other options that are printed underneath. So, and if what has been pre-dubbed can very easily be unraveled and brought to the surface of the desk for any changes when you're actually in the middle of the mix. So I think, how do you actually access that stuff? And some of the things that we've done on S6 particularly in order to help that be a simpler process. Many of the mixers now, they will work in a mode where they basically set up VCA masters for all the different food groups of different types of sounds. And then if they need to dive down into any one of them, they can basically just spill that VCA master onto the surface. Now, that's in its most basic form. That's been around, on digital consoles for a few years. What we've actually done now with S6 is given the ability, you can set up actually up to 2 spill zones, and then still have the rest of the desk left for just banking around, let's say, one session that you happen to be working on fairly closely. But now you can not only target a specific set of tracks like a layout to a spill zone, I can set track types. I could set VCAs, my VCA tracks just to that area. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you would, on one spill zone, I might have VCA masters, and as I spill one of it, it'll spill into a separate spill zone. But then I've still got the rest of the desk that may be some other stuff that I need to get to. Some of the stuff we did with S6, by putting a very powerful i5 processor into the center section, it allows us to arbitrate the Yukon traffic to multiple Pro Tools. So in the past, our Icon systems, you could only have one Pro Tools system on the surface. Well, obviously, with Yukon, we get the beauty of not only addressing multiple Pro Tools, Logic, Pyramix, Cubase.
That was really cool this morning in the demo, where you showed not only a Pro Tools system, but also on the same surface, 8 channels of Logic, or 2 channels of Logic, and then 8 channels of the thing we'll come on to in a minute, the new Matrix.
Yeah, I think, there was probably, Yukon was developed by Euphonics, before Avid acquired them. But obviously, since the Avid acquisition, I think most of the third-party developers for Yukon were probably a little bit, okay, so what's Avid up to here, and should we still, and of course our intention is, we want this control surface to support your application. I think now that we're sort of a few years into this, it's been really a very good relationship between the Avid and our competitors on on the application side of things. And it's not just for post production in music. You've got a producer that might write his music, compose, and use VIs and Logic and mix in Pro Tools. So having the ability to have both up on the surface at the same time is something that a lot of music customers
Yeah, I mean, and certainly. When Simon had the two systems locked together, we were like, now that's cool. Yeah. That's definitely an S6 in a music environment rather than just in a post environment. Because I think recently a lot of people have been thinking S6, that's a post thing.
Well, yeah. Well, I think post, for a lot of reasons, S6 is, there's obviously a certain price point to S6, and, music studios have been maybe a little more financially challenged. And I think for a lot of people that are maybe looking for certain coloration that maybe they would get from a more traditional console. But I think, so some of the things that we've done in terms of just having third-party hardware developers that are also Yukon partners. So, for example, what started out with DAD, with the AX32 as a Yukon-controlled monitor section that would work with Artist Series, we've sort of further developed that relationship where we now have a version of that, which is the Matrix I/O box, that's providing, pretty much the biggest MADI router of any digital console that's out there to a control surface. So, and a digital monitor section that will address as wide as a 64-channel Atmos playback environment. So, I think having Yukon has allowed us using some third-party hardware tools and having a modular system where you can, most traditional DSP consoles, the monitor sections would only go to 7.1 wide. And if you're in a Dolby Atmos workflow, in a big Dolby Atmos stage, you may have 64 channels of speaker playback. There's no DSP console that will address 64 channels of monitoring, right? So, through Yukon and setting up a monitor profile in the Matrix, it allows you to build, depending on whether I'm an Atmos workflow or 7.1 or 5.1, with a single box. I can basically patch in the RMU just through the MADI ports, and if I'm in an Atmos workflow, it'll take the outputs of the RMU through the monitor section and drive 64 channels. If I'm in 5.1, you just load a different monitor profile, or you could fold down your Atmos to 5.1. So it's given us actually a much more powerful, flexible system, because I can not only it's got a 1500 squared router, so it gives me the ability to route signals around the facility without having to go through the Pro Tools mixer. One of the one of the things DSP console owners always liked about them versus a control surface as well, I've got a very powerful router. If I want to take a signal from my iPod or my iPhone and bring it in and send it out to the monitor section, I don't have to go through it. Boot Pro Tools and go through a track and Pro Tools. So it's got a very powerful routing system, and with all of the I/O it supports, it will allow you, let's say, with its Dante capabilities, I can send Q mixes from Pro Tools out to Talent over Dante, and they can use, Focusrite's got some amazing little boxes, the way you got your own little personal headphone.
Trying to get myself one of those at the moment.
Exactly. So it's given you actually now with an S6 control surface or any of our Yukon control surfaces, the scalability depending on what your needs are. If you are in more of a capture environment where you're tracking, whether it's on music or I'm doing voiceovers or in a post situation, that you've got all the utilities to be able to address the talent's needs for Q mixes. If I'm in a mix situation, a remix situation, you have that ability with the same box to scale a monitor section to drive a 64 speaker playback environment. So I think Yukon is really coming into its own, and since Avid acquired Euphonics, obviously with Artist Color, some of it with Media Composer's integration, of Yukon. I think you've now got a lot of power, not just on the audio side, but on the video side, and we have more and more third-party developers that are signing up for Yukon because we provide tools that people that are basically using their applications on a desktop can have some hardware to enhance their experience with their applications.
I think that was one of the things going way back when when it was the Euphonics artist mix pre-Avid. We all looked at those and went, yeah, we'd love some of that action. As Pro Tools guys, we were all like, oh, fantastic. Oh, it only supports Logic. We could really do with that in our workflow. And then all of a sudden, a few years down the track, boom, we're there. We've got potential to be mixing on an artist series or an S3.
Right.
And I think the S3 as a platform with the dock has now really come into its own.
Well, it has. When you look at S3 as a standalone, you had 16 faders in there. You really didn't have the facilities of a master section. Obviously you could add other artist type modules to provide more functionality, whether it's a transport or what have you. But I think what we really needed, you sort of had the control surface, the I/O channels side of that. What you needed was more of the master section. And of course, having something that was a free app that ran on an iPad and giving you that same ability to scroll through the tracks in the session, to have exploded track view where I can access plugins from that. I've got my transport controls. I've got my soft keys, which will obviously in the same way that you've got your soft key section on an S6, having the ability to load up your soft keys on on the iPad part coupled with a dock is giving you it's a poor man's S6, but it's got for essentially $6,000 you're getting a lot of power there.
It's a lot of console. So in such a modular workflow, obviously we know that you can configure your S6 and various resale partners have got their options for configuring stuff, and Andy and the team here at Jigsaw, we're more than happy to speak to any of you about your S6 needs. But the cool thing about it is you're always bringing out new modules and new elements. So we've got the surround panel in this particular one, but you've also brought the post module.
Yeah. So, when you look at traditional DSP consoles, what's actually happened with immersive mixing, where traditionally as we said before, the DSP section, you've got your channel mixer and you've got your monitor section. Now that's actually been removed out, and you're actually now printing the requirements for a Pro Tools recorder in a post environment are getting very significant. That it used to be that your recorder in a 517.1 environment, you could get by with 64, 96 channels. Now when you're printing Atmos, you've essentially got a 9.1 bed, you've got up to 118 objects, but then you've got your component 9.1 stems, right, of music, dialogue, and effects. So in essence, you need to, on a big, if you're doing the big action films, you need 192 tracks on your Pro Tools recorder. So how do you actually access this stuff? Because if I'm not just punching in on a music, dialogue, and effects stem, I'm going to be punching in as I'm writing stuff to objects. So one of the things we did with our post module is off the bat, it's gone from 8 paddles wide to 10 paddles wide. So you can get an entire Atmos bed across, a 9.1 bed across there. But because it's Yukon controlled, it doesn't have the same limitations of Sony 9-pin in terms of can only access, it's limited in track count. It couldn't, 9-pin doesn't allow you to access 192 tracks. So being Yukon enabled, I can access any one of those 192 tracks from the post module. And then taking it one step further, what you need in order to access those, I've got a few, 9.1 beds, but I also have a lot of objects, so I need some way of bringing layouts of objects onto those paddles. So the post module has its own set of layouts, so I could bring back 10 helicopter objects, or I could, bring back, and of course having the ability, with Atmos now that you start grouping different types of objects, I can have VCA masters for my objects. So I could have a bunch of them that might be, explosion sounds, guns, some different types of hard effects, as I say, spaceships, helicopters, whatever they are. And if I punch on the VCA master paddle, it will drop in all of the slave objects that are underneath that VCA master. So it's taken the traditional PEC Direct module, and we've just given it a whole, it's gone to a whole new level just in terms of its versatility and the amount of content that it can address.
But the funny thing is, I looked at it and went, that's not really not a very music recording environment.
Yeah.
But actually, it's an incredibly music orientated environment. If you need to be able to go in to record X number of tracks really easily. Simon was showing that and I'm going, oh, okay, I get that in a music environment.
Well, absolutely. People are using VCA masters in the music sessions every bit as much as the post guys. So, whether I've got, my percussion, I've got drums, or if you're in a film scoring application where I've got, my strings, I've got my, my brass, woodwinds, whatever. You can have all of those on their own independent paddle on the post module. In fact, some composers, some of the bigger composers, are actually recording orchestras in sections now. So it allows you. Or if I just need to do a pickup on on a certain, whether it's percussion or keyboards or guitars or background vocalists, I can punch on those guys from the post module without having to do a lot of track arm, unarming these tracks and arming these guys. They're all preset and on their own paddles, and I can spill them to the surface. So if I just want to get the second singer to do a pickup because they were maybe a little flat in that section, you can do that using the post module. So it's actually got a lot of musical applications.
Well, Rich, thank you for joining me up here. I appreciate it. It's a very, very long day for
my pleasure,
all you guys.
Always happy to.
It's great to have such an open dialogue with you guys at Avid now. We really appreciate it, and hopefully the community appreciate it as well. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much.
We'll have a great last session downstairs, talking about all things Atmos and surround, and a fantastic VR demonstration, which I'm hoping will be repeated again in sort of future events here at Jigsaw 24. But for now, I've been James from Pro Tools Expert, and we'll see you again soon for some more Gear Talk.